Hey guys, it's Matthew here once again, and I've been forced to make a few pretty damning conclusions about the Wanda rather early on, even though I've only been playing it for 2 or 3 days. I have hit level 89 and done pretty much everything there is to do, thrusting the character into endgame scenarios a bit sooner than I was hoping to, but more or less he was ready for it, so there's no reason not to. Um, Throughout this video, I will talk over the top of plenty of boss kills and some clear speed here or there in anything from tier 10 up to tier 15 maps, as well as some Guardians and Shaper attempts too. So as you can see, with the first few minutes it will be mostly tier 15s and Atziri and all that, and for these purposes, the character is actually pretty good and feels really good to play and performs exactly as I would have expected it to. As a raider, it's rather fun having a bunch of frenzies, moving rather fast, attacking really fast, and doing quite substantial damage to pretty much everything, and especially bosses. With a Wither Totem and just attacking a few barrages, almost always you will be clearing things immediately. Now as you can see, Kinetic Blast still does have some frame rate issues when you're attacking large packs, especially because I don't hit super hard. But then you come across a boss here and he dies before getting any mechanics off. Likewise, this is a tier 13 I think, with the Warbands bosses. Now most of them just die immediately and then I have to actually fight one of them a little bit. And the biggest problem with the build is playing point blank and barrage means you do have to get kinda dirty, up close and personal, and attack bosses to do the main bulk of your damage. With this build, it's not really something you sit back and just pew pew away with. And of course, sometimes you got to reset flasks and all that. But the biggest issue as a raider is actually, getting up your frenzy charges, because if you come in with absolutely none to a boss, then you have to stand there and attack for like 5 seconds, just building up 8 frenzy charges, which most builds don't have to deal with. This here is a double boss shipyard, I think, or maybe a single boss shipyard, I can't remember now. But yeah, these guys die pretty easily too. Like I said though, bit dangerous, you gotta go in for the face tank, and compared to the Dream Feather build, which is very similar to this one, you don't have Whirling Blades or Fortify. Now, this is our first example of Guardians. This is the Minotaur Guardian, the first one I tried out. I'm still not 6-linked, this is still a 5-link, and more or less fairly budget, except for the Cospris and the Vinktars. Everything else in the character is really quite cheap, and basically all you can do for it anyway, so cheap doesn't matter in this scenario because I've more or less maxed him out, except for the 6-link and a couple of levels here or there. So I'd say I'm missing something like 30-40% DPS on my single target only, and you can see it's quite fucking slow. So for most of these Guardians, I'll, start it out at normal speed and then speed it up twice just to get through it. The Minotaur was not too bad once I figured out exactly how I should be doing it. Died a few times to some noob mistakes. But yeah, can't just face tank, do have to play the game a bit, run around a bit, and you'll get them down without too many issues. DPS isn't all that amazing, but it wasn't all that bad either. It was certainly manageable, and considering it's a 5-link, I wasn't too disappointed with it. Fight overall takes something like 3 or 4 minutes, so it wasn't too long, or maybe even 2 or 3 minutes. I don't know. It wasn't too long, it didn't feel that bad, considering there is still the prospects of more DPS coming on the character if I were to keep playing it, or eventually get the 6-link. So next was the Hydra Boss that I faced, and the Hydra is immune to poison, as we all know, and my build is somewhat largely based around poison, but this actually was not too bad either. With the movement speed we get from the frenzy charges, and just the general character's sort of mobility, it is rather easy to dodge everything and keep up your DPS. You just have to occasionally frenzy the target. And once you can get all your flasks up attacking the boss at a certain stage, which you'll see in a second, she does take quite a bit of damage. So all in all, this fight only took something like 3 or 4 minutes, where I was expecting it to take 5 to 10. Adds DPS is pretty good too, and rather easy to handle. I think we get a good flask phase here. There it is. So with a good flask phase, you do take down something like 10 to 15% of the boss health, and you don't necessarily have to dodge the range attacks because of all the evasion we have, and just sustain. The biggest problem is getting hit by the balls. The balls hit for about 5k, so I just barely survive them every time I get hit by them, and I did pull this off completely deathless, even though you see me almost die a few times, which is almost exclusively to the balls. Now, my biggest issue is dropping with a totem. That thing dies all the time, so it's a bit of a struggle to keep that up, because it is a large part of your single target. Next up is the Phoenix Boss. He was also rather easy. Just got to play around his mechanics, run around a bit, and not get hit by stuff. I think I did him deathless as well. And this fight was fairly straightforward, 3 or 4 minutes once again, and not too bad as far as DPS, sustainability, survivability goes on this fight. With a totem, does a lot of work, seems to survive well enough most of the time, and Vile Lightning Trap as well as Vinctars helps you do some good DPS when you can find an opportunity to actually do some DPS. Once again, still on a 5 link, a 6 link would help a lot in this sort of scenario, and it was fairly smooth, and I'm not at all disappointed with how this one went either. The last one we're going to come across is the Chimera, and that was a real struggle. I did manage to kill it. It did take 3 extra portals, I think. So, had about 3 left. It was a bit tense, and we'll talk about it when we get there in just a second. Boom. So here we are at the Chimera. Now the biggest problem with him is flask sustainability. Once I run out of flasks, it becomes kind of a problem. So in that sense, Pathfinder would be much superior to this. But also the ad phases. The ads are rather chaos and poison resistant, and that was a huge struggle for me to take care of, as you'll see in a minute. They just did not take enough damage, and the damage scaling just isn't there for me to be able to kill things like these chaos-resistant ads and some really tough tanky stuff. I'm not sure the build has enough scaling for that, as you'll see on the Shaper as well. So here are the ads. I sped it up a bit because this is actually pretty painful. Just wasn't killing him fast enough, and especially because I'd come into the phases with absolutely no flasks. Whereas a Pathfinder auto-regens every now and again, you'd probably come into the fight with at least a few flasks, whereas these I had to play real carefully, because until I could get flasks up I couldn't really stand still and face tank, or even just have enough DPS to actually kill. So it was a real kind of iffy situation, and made me not too happy with how the character went. These ads too just kept on fucking surviving, and ultimately I died to one of them, I think, because it hits me, the boss, and it bleeds me, and I didn't react fast enough. So it's kind of a shame that Pathfinder is just the best shit possible, because flasks are so important, but it is what it is. Raider is still good, and I was still happy with how it performed with everything up until tier 16, but the longer the fight goes on, the more you definitely need your flask sustain and flask regen that only Pathfinder can provide. It's either that or have way more DPS than you possibly need or could imagine, and only the most cookie cutter best scaling builds are going to have that, and this Wander just isn't that cookie cutter, isn't that insanely scaled. In any case, here's the Shaper, and this is what made me just basically concede that the character's not really doable anymore at this level of content. So everything up until the Shaper and the Guardians I was pretty happy with, but at the Guardians and then especially the Shaper, I decided I just could not recommend this to anyone else because it's too much of a struggle. If you're only looking to do maps and get up to tier 15, then that's perfectly fine. You can play this character. If you're looking to actually kill the Guardian and Shaper, this is not the build for you. It's not the build for me. It's not the build for any of us. You probably need to be Pathfinder at the very least, or most likely CI, or most likely scaling Elemental as an Inquisitor to have real damage potential. Because this build just runs out of damage scaling, and there's nothing particularly special about this Wander that makes it have over-the-top scaling. Like, for example, the Dream Feather. This is essentially the exact same shit as the Dream Feather, except there's no evasion projectile scaling, so I'm missing like 200 or 300% proj damage, just with no real gain whatsoever. Because we also don't have Fortify, we also don't have Whirling Blades. Or the popular King of the Forest build that just popped up on Reddit a few days ago. the guy made a guide. That's with Reach of the Council and Assassin, and that has some actual insane scaling because of all the extra arrows you can get for your barrage that make the damage you deal so much more effective and actually, end game viable, because there is the scaling there for that type of build, which is built very similarly to this sort of build and Dreamfeather, except it's just got the scaling to make it great. So once again, these ads are pretty chaos resistant, and you can see how fucking hard it is for me to kill them, because there's nothing terribly special about this damage when it comes to the end game. As well as that, the Shaper himself is now immune to shocks. Previously you could bypass it with Vinktar's or Vile Lightning Trap. Likewise with certain other things like some of the Atziri clones, and the third boss in a trio fight, for example, at Uber. They're all immune to shock. No more Vinktar's, no more Vile Lightning Trap, and that makes any builds that don't have supreme damage just slightly worse. So in conclusion, I probably wouldn't play this. You can if you want, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll maybe have another wander up in the future. See you next time.